Hey, reading and writing teachers video is for you. This is if you have an ANET data set, and this is how you think about you complete this template. You want to have a couple resources open. You want to have the PLD guide handy. You probably want to have this ELA and math data spreadsheet open, just kind of for context. We're really focusing on standards for this template. So the big picture is useful and it's interesting, but you also want to obviously have open your IA's finals and standards dashboard. This is the most important tool for this time. So make sure that you dive into this. The first thing you want to do is make a copy. See that I named this myself, More and Dot. Share it with your coach maybe right away so that they have access to it. And here's the link to that standards dashboard. It's contained within here. You can also find it linked in the PLD agenda for today. Just a reminder, this data day, how to access your data sheet is kind of useful if you're feeling stuck on anything, but for ELA and math, it's pretty straightforward with the dashboard. So first thing you're going to do is you've got this high-level standard analysis. You should work with your teaching partner potentially on this. You can also fill it in for your own individual performance, but you see here I've got the 6th grade ELA test open, and I can either break this down by reading Teacher by Shaheen and Williams in this case, or I can go kind of bigger picture with the whole grade level. I would suggest for time's sake that you work with your partner on this and just complete it one time and copy it into both templates and use kind of the big picture data information. One flag I want to make for reading and math tests is that you'll see a couple of standards. I'm not sure which ones they are for math, but if you had a yoked question, and you see that here for the 6.1 standard in ELA, and that's pretty much across all grade levels, it's going to look like crazy low. And you might think, wow, have my students ever used quotes in class? In fact, they have. Part of this that you need to be aware of is that this is usually part 2 of a question. So if I click into ELA RL 6.1, I'll pull up over here on the right-hand side, and it's actually not going to show me this one in this case because it looks like there's a tech-enhanced question. So any tech-enhanced questions, you're not going to get any specificity on, which is kind of a bummer. But like this is likely one here. RI 6.1, we'll try this out. Yeah, you can see here on the side, it's like question 2B and 6B. So if you look here at like Williams 6B question, it looks like 61 of his kids got this right. That's more than 48% of his students, but what you have to know is that they had to get part A right to get credit for it. So it's like you've got to look at the nuance of that if you are analyzing a point 1 question or any yoked question on the math assessment. And a lot of our prioritized standards do come with yoked questions. So back to the template. You'll note here first it's just high-level standard analysis, and you will use this table. Click out of that to do that. MLL performance, student with disability performance here. I would make some considerations and notes on just a couple of those standards, perhaps the most high need ones or any that you've really zoomed in on or focused in on in your instruction over the course of the first quarter. Math teachers, you teach a little bit more of a standards specific curriculum, so you may have more to say on specific standards here versus ELA teachers. You might want to focus a little bit more on text and text complexity, and maybe note what kinds of questions are linked with what kinds of texts and make comments on that for yourself. Zooming down, it says narrow the focus, determine 2 to 4 prioritized standards for reteach. Good news for you, the network has already done that. So if you zoom all the way to the base here of this document, they've actually already chosen those for you. So you can see here for ELA and for math, it tells you specifically like what standards they want you to focus on and what questions those encompass on the test. So that's great. What we noticed when we were doing this analysis ourselves was that not all of these questions do students perform poorly on. Actually, a lot of them students did pretty well on, and I'll talk about what to do with that shortly. But it is asking you to kind of dive into these 6 standards for ELA, and it's largely, you see the same standards. If not, yeah, it is the same standards for every single grade. And these are the standards in ELA class, at least, that you pretty much are hitting with every unit, every day, and every lesson. So that kind of speaks a little bit more to structure. Math, it's a little bit more varied based on the content of the year. So, of course, up here, when it says narrow the focus, it says pick 2 to 4 prioritized standards. You should really choose the two that are probably the lowest. If you're an ELA teacher, I'm going to ask that you please choose point one as one of your 2 to 4 standards that you're going to focus for reteach here. If you've got time to do 3 or 4, that's great, but you can see they only left you 3 boxes, so 2 or 3 is really sufficient. So then we get into item level analysis for prioritized standards. So I've actually done a little bit of this work for the ELA test, and Patrice and Ellen have worked on this for the math test. So your leaders actually have a lot of thoughts on these. If you're feeling stuck, they should be available to help you. But if you look here, it will say pace the standard, give us the question number, and that's already been kind of sorted out, and overall performance. So I will go into the 8th grade test in this case right now for ELA, because that's where I've done some of my thinking. And in this case, I'll pull up what I had. We're going to look at RL 8.2. So I, of course, come down here to the standard. I just need just a quick moment to think. And I can see over here that, okay, we have a pretty great question actually to analyze. And the reason I like this question so much, I'll make sure that I'm on the proper page. All right, apologies. It looks like my recording space shifted on me. So you see here that in 8.2, I've got a pretty great question to analyze because there are really just 2 responses that most kids picked. So that's helpful and handy because I can see that, about 2/3 of kids picked the correct answer. About a third of kids pick this common distractor. So this really gives me something kind of to dig into. A lot of times if the wrong answers are distributed, like there's one question on the 8th grade test and the answer is like in the last paragraph, and there's kids kind of all over the place, and it just mostly tells me that maybe kids didn't read till the very end. They maybe were running out of time, they were stressed. So that's still useful information. It tells me that students need more practice reading arduous long texts in a timed manner. So I might think about that for my next assessment, like how I'm going to process and plan for that. But in this case, I've got a great example of a test that has a nice split. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my analysis. I'll paste the standard over here, RL 8.2, and you can see, of course, that this is one of the prioritized standards, question number 12 on the assessment. And so I've got that here. So it's question 12. Overall performance, in this case, it looks like as a grade level, we were 62.3%. Most common distractor was C. And then I've got a space here to fill in the most common misconception. So in this case, I've kind of done this work. So you can see here for 8.2, 62%. This was a theme question. And if you're, kind of with the ELA team, you are able to look at this question. But A was the correct answer, and it was listening to someone's stories can help you understand them better. And it was the most commonly chosen one. This is about a young boy who visits his grandfather in the hospital. At first, he doesn't want to be with the grandfather, and then they realize they have some things in common. The boy kind of laughs at his jokes and connects with him. And at the end, there's like this ironic moment, I guess, where he doesn't want to go home. The clock strikes an hour, and Grandpa has to kick him out of the nursing home, and he's like, kind of lingers because he doesn't want his mom to think he's in a big hurry because he wants to come back. So I made a note here just based on that, that students chose response C at a high level. And C was tempting because it's like another theme-oriented question. So I'm going to pause here and pull up the test. So as I look at the test, I can see B, it's important for older people to share their life stories with each other. That's not really a theme, big picture, and it can be difficult for someone to understand who grew up in a different country than you. That's really, there's references to Puerto Rico, but that is not, that would reflect kind of a misunderstanding of the text itself. That doesn't really come up as a core concept or idea. So getting back to my question in this case, in my analysis, I made the note here quite simply that it was tempting because it's another theme-oriented question. Learning about the past is an important part of understanding how people grow old, but it's actually not a big picture response. So in this case, the first part of both these answers is almost identical. And so this is why I think kids got confused and mixed up on it. So if I come back to the test itself, listening to someone's stories can help you understand them better versus learning about the past is an important part of understanding. Those are really similar. They're both theme oriented. Understanding how people grow old, that's not a lesson, it's not a theme, versus help you understand them better is kind of a portable, big picture, conceptual idea. So in this case, I made some final notes here about students needing to continue to practice in two areas. Number one, understanding the definition of theme. It's always big picture, has to be portable across text. And number two, reading and carefully checking the answers between the quote best two is important. I think if kids had read this carefully, they probably should have been able to sort out the correct answer. And so I'm thinking about that in my future teaching. Theme is going to come up again and again if I'm teaching To Kill a Mockingbird. Obviously, we're going to begin talking about theme, probably 2/3 of the way through the book when like the trial begins and the theme begins to reveal itself. And so I'm going to have these things in mind as I'm writing questions about theme. I'm going to have students kind of sort through with content they know really well, questions that are a little bit higher level, more rigorous and tricky. Within math, obviously we need to think about what kind of calculations went wrong. I don't know enough about math to comment on this intelligently, but this is the space where you kind of fill in a misconception and a reteach objective. So I'll copy over this template, what I had already written in the other template. And then the big thing here is to hit an objective that you might focus on reteaching. So students will be able to, in this case, analyze the tools, or analyze maybe how the author reveals the theme of TKAM in chapter blank through the lens of Stell as she watches Atticus run the trial. I haven't taught that book before, so I'm not 100% sure if that is totally accurate, but you're going to think about a moment, an opportunity down the line where this objective could come back into play, or where you may prioritize some small group instruction. Finally, you're planning your reteach down here. So you can use these same standards that you'd already worked through, and it says here to add a table for each prioritized reteach standard. I would do 2 of these really well. You probably don't have time to do 4 without working beyond the work time, and you shouldn't do that. It's better to spend your time doing just a couple at a high level and making some meaningful connections. Plan your reteach. In this case, you want to use the same. You've already written your objectives up top. Think about your reteach approach. If you are an ELA teacher, again, you can really prioritize thinking about 6.1, 7.1, 8.1 as being the art of annotation and close reading. And you should be thinking about how you're going to continue to hold all students accountable to high-level annotations, how you're going to sharpen and give more sophisticated purposes for annotation that align with students like having to go in and really deeply not only analyze, but actually comprehend complex texts. I think that matters a lot and is a great avenue for 6.1. Think about your assessment plan in this case. So if you're a math teacher, you're probably thinking about spiraling and pulling back into your do nows and your fluency work, the objectives that students did not master, the content that they didn't pull through on, and making sure it's built into your unit plan and your fluency work. And then finally over here in student groups, I thought this was a cool place to think about how you can utilize your special ed partners in particular. We had a couple of holes and gaps where students with disabilities were really significantly underperforming their typical peers. And so I think this is really crucial, thinking about how you can utilize maybe your SPED partner to run small groups, how you're going to empower them and not just use iExcel or iReady and kind of like pre-propagated programs, but how you're going to take the content that you're teaching or something that students missed and really empowering someone else to support you in providing students with the scaffolding that's necessary. You can also think about mandatory tutoring in this case. And you can also really should be thinking about how you're utilizing grouping within your classrooms. A sophisticated, data-driven, and informed classroom is going to be constantly breaking into small groups. That's taking advantage of student skill levels and allowing you to teach smaller groups in more targeted ways and allowing students who are ready to move and work independently to do exactly that. So I hope that that's helpful. And make sure you submit this to your coach when you finish and be ready to catch up with them on your work.